I want to thank you all for coming to this talk. I'm going to explain to you the Marine Corps leadership fundamentals and how I applied them to game development. It inspires me to see so many faces here bright and early, like ready to kick off this leadership panel and or leadership conference. And I'm excited to share what I learned and give back to you. So let's kick things off. Leadership is the sum of those qualities of intellect, human understanding, and moral character that enables a person to inspire and control a group of people successfully. That was said by General John A. Lejeune, the 13th Commandant of the Marine Corps. He was what was considered the Marines, and he basically set the foundation for teamwork and morale to get things done. And so I'm here to pass on those fundamentals on to you in an easier way that doesn't include boot camp, getting yelled at, or push-ups. The hardest thing you had to do was get up early in the morning, which is also a Marine Corps principle. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to talk to you about breaking some leadership myths of what you think might be happening. I'm going to go over the 14 leadership traits. I'm going to give you a couple of my pearls of wisdom, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. I'm excited to talk about this because the Marine Corps philosophy is basically about creating leadership. And being a leader is about directly facing conflict. It sometimes means that you have to go out of your comfort zone to lead your team into the unknown, even if it means you have to do it alone. Marines have been making leaders for over 243 years. The Marine Corps has to make leaders because the business is dangerous. The Marine Corps understands the absolute need for flexibility during job growth, and it's literally a promotion factory. You learn from the people before you, and then you teach that and pass it on to the people after you. That's why everyone goes through the same training. Every Marine starts out the same. A scared recruit at boot camp. And it's actually called basic training because there you get your foundation of guiding principles that can, if taken to heart, can propel you to accomplish great things. Everyone has this exact same potential. Even if you're the, person that is an introvert, an extrovert, there is a great equalizer, and that is the merit-based promotion system. It applies to everyone. We're all on the exact same team, and we all have the same potential, and we all call ourselves Marines. We're all the same. It's very flat. And while some of us never get a chance to go to war or want to, there are still different types of battles to fight. Some of the Marines become their own trailblazers in their own right, and push boundaries to become the first African-American officer of the United States Marine Corps, like Frederick C. Branch. And it's because of pioneers like him that we have the first Latino Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, like John L. Estrada, or the first female African-American combat pilot in all of the armed forces, like Vernice Armour. Or perhaps the first Latina to become a general in the Marines. And she literally went from private to general. She enlisted in 1977 and got her commission to general in 2006. Angela Salinas. Or perhaps the first woman in Marine Corps history to lead an infantry platoon like Marina Hero. And then there was me. So I joined in 1999, and I started off as a private. I was one of the last of my peers to join the unit. Everyone was basically already ahead of the game. They were private first classes, they were lance corporals, and I was one of the last privates to arrive. I got promoted to private first class, and it was in my hard work during a long extended field operation that I got meritoriously promoted to lance corporal, and that bumped me up to be elevated with my peers. And now we were all on the same track, and it allowed me for the opportunity to kind of figure out, like, well, what do I have to do next? Like, what is my next stepping stone? And so I learned the promotion system, and I realized that there was a system in which you would get promoted by doing all these like really great things. And once I learned the system, I realized that there was a score, and if you had a higher score than the score of that month, then you would get promoted. So it's basically this objective-based system that tells you if you are at this capability, then you can get promoted. And so I took that to heart, and I looked into how I could achieve that. You know, your physical fitness score, your rifle score, your monthly pros and cons, which are considered basically like your employee reviews that your boss gives you annually or monthly and then annually. All that gets put together into a composite score. And I realized, well, how do I raise that? Like, how do I make myself better? How do I improve? And along the way, I found out that you could take extra courses and get like extra points for continuing to have the initiative to invest in knowledge and look for things. So I did that. And I actually ended up getting promoted before all of them. So I was last to arrive, first to get promoted. And that really helped me, you know, feel confident in my abilities and look into what I had and what I was capable of. And so then, you know, my command saw that, and then they continued to send me to more schools. I went to a mortar leaders course, and I finished second. They sent me to an infantry squad leaders course, and I finished first. Then they sent me to another leadership course, and I finished second again. They put me on boards and tests, and I won them. I continued to win them. I won 7 of them, in fact. I was what was considered to be the NCO of the quarter, which is like the employee of the month. And they put my picture up in the chow hall, like in the cafeteria. So that you had like the pictures of like the president, the vice president, the Department of Defense secretary, the base commanding general, the division general, and me, you know, and it didn't give me like any like front of the line privileges or anything like that, but it was kind of interesting to, you know, feel, you know, the weight of what's happening and like see myself recognized and continue to like take everything that I've learned and take that back to my teams and my Marines, and how would I make it so that, you know, they could achieve greatness as well. And so, I ended up getting promoted to sergeant in under 3 years. I became a section leader in charge of about 30 Marines. Most of them were my peers. So now, not only did I get promoted before them, but now I'm in charge of them. And that was actually really hard, because it's hard to tell your friends what to do. It's hard to lead your peers. It's hard to, you know, say like, I'm the one that you should listen to, and this is why. And so I eventually realized that like I didn't want to be mortars, and I wanted to try and do my own things. I wanted to push myself even further. And so I applied and I tried out, and I became a sniper, and I was a Marine Corps sniper for 2 years. And in that training, I also went to Army Special Forces training, and I got a chance to be the only Marine in that class, and everybody was then looking to me as to like, what are you going to do now? You know, like they had their own foundation of basics, and the Marine Corps has a different set of quality standards. And I could tell that even though I was amongst elite soldiers, like I had something different. I had like a level of initiative, I had a level of camaraderie and teamwork that wasn't there for them. And I started to ask myself, like, why is that? But I didn't really get a chance to expand upon that because I got deployed. And when I got deployed, it was like literally an overnight deployment, and I had to take 8 of my snipers and employ them into a team. Like we had to go in, get a mission done, and bring them all back home. And then I realized that war is a horrible thing, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I became a combat instructor, and I said, how can I take all my knowledge and everything that I've done and use it to teach the next generation of leaders at officer candidate school, and help them learn from our mistakes, help them learn to lead the next generation of Marines, and make sure that, they can get the job done. You could say I did a lot, and it's because I did. And then I got out, and I was lost. And, I had accomplished so much in the service, but now I had nothing. Like in 2007, when I got out, I realized I didn't want to be a cop. I didn't want to be a SWAT. I didn't want to do anything with guns. Like, my passion is video games, and I want to figure out, how do I apply what I know and put myself on a trajectory to do that. There was no boot camp to reintegrate me back into the real world. I was alone. I had no team. I had no boss, just myself and my training. And that's when I realized you have to lead yourself. Like, you have to be the one to do it. You have to be the one to get up when you are down. And so I went back to my foundation and my own goals, which was to be the best, get started, have that initiative. And so I applied to USC, which at the time was the best game school, and I got rejected. And it was heartbreaking. But then I remembered that I also failed out of sniper school my first time. And it was me getting back up, me trying again, that made all the difference. And the second time that I went through, I was given like a partner that was actually more of like dead weight to me. And that's when, like, in the thick of it all, I realized, you're not going to get in the way of my success. And now I'm alone, and I'm thinking, well, how do I become successful? Like, what do I do? And I thought to myself, like, I have to get back up off of this and try again. So I called USC, and I spoke with their admissions department, and I said, what's missing? And, this is going back to that cutting score, going back to me saying, like, what are the things that I need to do to accomplish getting in? And they were basically like, you're just missing a math and an English credit, which were the two things that I was avoiding because I hate those classes. And so that summer, I took, summer and English classes, reapplied, and I got in. It made a difference. Then I went to school, and I applied for an assistant producer job at Telltale shortly before graduating, and I got rejected again. And then at USC, during like one of our demo days, I recognized the CEO and from some media things, and I went up to genuinely have a conversation with Dan Connors and just thank him for The Walking Dead, because it was one of the greatest things that I had played. And in that genuine moment, as I was walking away, like I in my head, I realized that I was having my own like binary choice moment, and like the two things that popped up were just like walk away or bring it up, And I said to myself, like, this is it. Like, I am here. I have to try this. I have to go for it. I have to have the courage to ask, even if it's to fail. Like, I have gotten this far. Why am I going to stop now? And so I basically then said, by the way, I applied for this position. We had a talk, and I got hired, and it made all the difference. Then while at Telltale, I shipped over 20 titles. I was a lead on an episode. I volunteer with StackUp.org, helping veterans transition out of the service and reintegrate, through gaming. Like Jen said, I became an IGDA Next Gen leader, and now I'm co-chair of the Latinx in Gaming Special Interest Group, because the importance is to keep growing, to keep getting back up. To be a leader means trying things that have never been done before, like getting out of your comfort zone, doing what others feel like you may not be able to do, like prove them wrong. And now I'm going to walk you through the fundamentals of what I learned. So everybody write this down. And the reason that I'm saying that is because this is actually what I want you to like Google afterwards if you ever forget. USMC RP 0103, that has the 14 leadership traits and 11 principles that will be some of the things that I talk about today. And this way you can actually listen to what I'm going to say instead of having to copy down what's on the slides. And you can return to that as needed. So by the end of today, I would like for you all to know what the leadership traits are and how they apply to you as a leader. And in the long term, what I would like for you to see is how can you challenge your own leadership style? How can you improve? And when you think you know it all, come back to the basics, because I can tell you that there's always room for growth. Okay, so before we start learning new content, let's clear up some misconceptions and break some myths about what we think we know about leadership. A leadership position or title creates a leader. No, it doesn't. I know we've all seen people fail upwards. There can be bad creative leads, there can be horrible managers, there can be terrible CEOs, sometimes even at the same company. But you can't blame them. You can't expect them to know if they've never been taught. And chances are the person that promoted them didn't even know what they were fostering. So an issue that often happens with leadership positions is that they assume that if someone has led something once, they can do it again. And that's not true. Every role and every job is dynamic, and leaders have to have the ability to adapt. Great leaders are born, not made. Also not true. The Marine Corps makes leaders all the time. Though some people have innate leadership qualities, it's very rare. And most leaders are made by the circumstances that they're put in. The Marine Corps instills accountability into everyone. There is no excuses for someone not taking accountability. Even if it's the last two people, someone is senior. Even if you are the same rank, then it goes down to who's been in longer. If you both came into boot camp the same day, then it goes down to who's older. There is always a way to say the buck stops here, and you need to be the one that is responsible and accountable for this. Leaders have to be tough. No, they don't. I got yelled at all the time when I was in the military. Fear works, but it's not the only strategy. In fact, I hardly ever yelled. And so they knew that if I was yelling at them, then something must have seriously gone wrong. What leaders need to do is possess the ability to influence people, and there is a phrase that says you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, because it's true, right? You have to inspire people, not just use fear to tell them what to do. Leaders have to have all the answers. Also not true. Leaders that tell you that they know everything are lying to you, and if you don't have that trust, then it's hard to want to follow. But our common fear is our common truth, and that's that we don't know what we're doing. We're all just trying to figure it out. There is this inability to communicate our fear or, come off as less experienced or not qualified. But I'm telling you that, as a leader, all you really need is to have a vision and a sense of direction, because great leaders listen more than they speak. They listen with the goal to understand, not the goal to answer. Leaders do not fail. False. I failed at so many things, but it's my ability to keep getting back up that makes me stand out. Leaders make mistakes all the time. All humans do. You can't expect to get it right every time or even the first time. I've learned more from my failures and correcting those mistakes than when things go easy, because I get the feedback, I get a challenge, I learn from it, and I move on. And then the next time I'm at that crossroads, I learn not to do that again. There's also a phrase that says, calm seas never made a good sailor. That's true. You have to challenge, you have to learn all the things, and that's how, you get better. Leadership is about results, not people. Also not true. Who do you think gets things done? It's your team. It's not just on you. And so what's going to happen the next time around that you have something to do? Are those people going to come back? Are they going to want to work with you? I know people that didn't want to be on teams after working on other people because I was one of them. I don't have what it takes. This is probably the one that I fall for all the time. This goes back to me saying, like, what am I doing? This is when that self-doubt trickles back in. And it's really natural as a leader for that to happen because you have a lot of weight on your shoulders, the gravity of your team, the gravity of the mission. There's so much to do that it can feel overwhelming. And that's when I remember my training and I focus on the basics. And by now, it's muscle memory. And that is basically mission accomplishment and truth welfare. That is basically the two fundamentals of Marine Corps leadership history and that they come down to in this order. If you can remember anything, remember this. Like, this is going to be your guiding light. Okay, here's a picture of my dog to break up the show a little bit. I put him in everything I do. All right, so now let's talk about the 14 leadership traits. The Marine Corps is notorious for acronyms, so if you are curious and you ever want to memorize these, this is what you have to remember. JJ did tie buckle. What does it mean? Who is JJ? What is he tying? Irrelevant. But the words, the first letter of every leadership trait makes this wonderful phrase. All right, so the first one is justice. Justice is giving reward and punishment according to the merits in the case in question. It's the ability to administer a set of rewards and punishments impartially and consistently. Displaying fairness is critical in order to gain the trust and respect of a team. It will help maintain discipline and unit cohesion, especially when you're parsing out responsibilities. Avoid showing favoritism to any of your team members. Also, don't publicly blame one person when something goes wrong or give praise to one person when the team's successes all went right. Like, treat everyone fairly. Don't play favorites with your friends. You know, if you have a really good deal, if you have some bugs that you have to do, like, be impartial, get it done. That's justice. Judgment. Judgment is the ability to weigh facts and possible courses of action in order to make sound decisions. The successful completion of a task depends on how well you know your team's capabilities. If the task assigned is something that your team hasn't been trained to do, then they're probably likely to fail. And failure will lower your team's morale and their self-esteem and also be damaging to your own product. You're committing to things before you understand what it takes to do them. So some things to consider are to avoid volunteering your team for tasks that are beyond their capabilities. Make sure that your assigned tasks have reasonable expectations. And assign the tasks equally among your team, like don't overload them. Dependability. Dependability is the certainty of proper performance or duty. Can you deliver consistently? Can people on your team, both up and down the chain, rely on you? A little story that I have is when I was an assistant producer, like one of the things that I often had to do was buy dinner for the people that were staying late and working after hours. And sometimes when I would get home, I would check my email and I would see emails that basically were like, hey, did someone take my salad? Or I'm missing this. Did someone take my food by mistake? And to me, that felt horrible that people were staying late and were counting on being fed as as a meal for their extra and hard work, and they were missing their dinners. And because it was my responsibility to put in the dinner order, I took it an extra step further, and I created a roster. And when the food arrived, I was there. I was literally there to make sure that they got fed, and I checked their names off, and I said, you ordered this, you get this, here's your food, do the work, stay late. For them, make sure that they have something to count on, because they're already, giving extra. And, if you're jamming out and leaving before that, like, that's not an example that you want to set. So take care of them, be dependable for them. And then another thing that I even did was I ordered a couple extra, because I knew that somebody was going hungry, somebody was missing the email, somebody wasn't going to, get their email in time because they were probably in a meeting. And so I took it upon myself to be there for them. And, it really helped, build a morale. And it was something that, I was there for them. Initiative, taking action in the absence of orders. Since leaders work often without close supervision, emphasis is placed on being a self-starter. Initiative is one of the founding principles of the Marine Corps. After all, they were formed by a bunch of volunteers in a tavern. Like, that's our history. It was a bunch of guys drinking that said, we've had enough. Let's do something about it. So ways to improve initiative are to take every opportunity that offers increased responsibility. In the absence of orders, without having someone tell you what to do, try to perform the actions that your senior would tell you to do. I think that initiative is the most important trait. I consider it an express lane for leadership. You're literally filling the gaps, and it will get you noticed. There will be more work to do, but that work also means more experience. So when I was in between being an assistant producer and a designer, they gave me this hybrid role where I would basically sit in on the creative meetings and take notes. And I would, learn like what it takes to write these scenes. And there was a time when we were working on Batman where there was more work to be done than we had people on the team. So I volunteered, and I said, I'll write the scene. And that made all the difference, because once that scene was written, they played through it. They were like, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. He knows how to do this. Let's give him a chance. And it was because of those scenes that it gave them the vision into what I could do and got me promoted. So with initiative, there's a difference between, being told to do something and also saying, like, I already did it, right? Like, I know there's often times in meetings where somebody will ask, who's taking notes? And, initiative, there's a fine line between, like, I'll do it and I'm already doing it, right? So, like, initiative has more levels, and the earlier that you can get on board, I think the more you will get noticed. But also know when to have initiative and when to volunteer for things, right? Use your judgment. A funny story, when I was in boot camp, I was trying to be a leader and excel at things. And my drill instructor basically said, all right, I need 3 volunteers. And so 3 of us went and ran out. And he said, okay. He took us around back and he made us push for like 15 minutes. And he was the lesson was don't just volunteer for everything. Like, use your judgment, find out the information of the things that you need to do before you're going to jump in. Test the waters. Decisiveness, the ability to make decisions promptly and announce them in a clear and forceful manner. A leader must be able to estimate a situation and then make a sound decision based upon that. Hesitation or reluctance to make a decision will lead to a loss of confidence in your abilities as a leader. Loss of confidence from your team will often create confusion or hesitation in things getting done, and equal to a loss of time or a loss of work. It's often better to make a decision earlier than to make a potentially better decision later for the expense of time. Some things to consider are taking the advice and suggestions of your teammates before you make a decision. Consider the effects of your decision on all the members of your team, and make sure that you announce the decisions with enough time to give people to react to the things that you are now asking them to do. Bad news does not get better with time, so have the courage to get it over with. Like, make a decision. Don't hesitate. When I was a lead on my Minecraft episode, I had this amazing idea, what I thought was amazing, for this story that is based upon 3 different towns, and then the order in which you visit a town depends on the people that you meet, and you go back and forth, and the narrative branches and changes. And I thought it was going to be the coolest thing. My writer was on board. I thought we were going to push some boundaries of storytelling for what we were doing, but it wasn't doable, and it was hard to say no. And there's sometimes a part as a leader where you have to kill your babies and let go of the preciousness of your ideas. It's cool, but it's out of scope. It's work. You're now asking things to get made that are outside the realm, right? So I had to go back and use my judgment and decisiveness to just cut it and cut the feature, cut where it is, and do that. And sometimes it sucks, but leadership isn't necessarily about feeling good. Tact. Tact is the ability to deal with others in a manner that will maintain good relations and avoid offense. Simply stated, it's the ability to say the right thing and at the right time. The quality is, the quality of consistently treating your team with respect and courtesy is a sign of maturity. Tact allows for commands, guidance, and opinions to be explained in a constructive and beneficial manner. And you must use tact at all time, under all conditions, regardless of your true emotions. There was a time where I was sitting in a review, and we had, the reviewer and the person who made the work, and the reviewer, when looking and playing through the scene, his literal feedback was, "This sucks." And that was it. There was no constructive criticism. There was no room for growth. And, in my head, I was just like, oh my God, what are you doing? What is happening to the morale of this person who's, worked on something for a long time? And when you give it to them, your only feedback is, "This sucks." So I had to then step in, use my tact to find a way to get some more feedback, constructive feedback from the reviewer, put out the fire of, what just happened with this person, and steer the conversation back into some actionable items. So tact is really the way in which you carry yourself. Integrity. The uprightness of character and soundness of moral principles, the quality of truthfulness and honesty. A person's word is their bond. Leadership is taught by example. You show your team that you are willing to do the same things that you ask them to do. There's this famous Marine Corps story that tells you to do the right thing even when no one is looking, and it's about a young lance corporal who is walking through the courtyard, sees a piece of trash on the general's lawn, picks it up and throws it away, puts it in the trash can. And as the legend goes, the general was outside his office looking out the window at the moment that happened, and immediately calls the guy over and promotes him on the spot. I don't think that ever happened. But if it didn't, whoever told me that is not using their integrity properly. So when it came down to integrity in my own version in game dev, we were submitting some content for ratings and sending it off to ESRB and, putting together the packet of everything that needs to get done. And if anyone has ever submitted for ratings, you kind of know that like what you are sending has to be final product. And one of the deliverables that we had still hadn't come in, and they had asked me to just be like, oh, well, send them another disk and then say we'll send them the disk later. And that really did not resonate well with me. I couldn't take that upon myself. And so I told them that I wasn't going to do it. And, it's my signature, it's my account on that. And if something happens, that's going to reflect back on me. So I stood up to them and I said, look, I will fill out this packet, but I'm not putting my name on it. And if you want to submit it like this and have the repercussions in that conversation, like that's on you. Like that's not going to invalidate my integrity. I wouldn't sign it with my name on the line. And so, a word of advice is, if you have to morally second guess yourself about doing something, like really ask yourself if it's worth doing. Like don't sacrifice your integrity for the sake of getting things done. Enthusiasm. The display of sincere interest and exuberance in the performance of duty. Displaying interest in a task and optimism that it can be successfully completed will greatly enhance the likelihood that the task will be completed. And another example of this is that you can have fun during difficult times. Shortly after 9/11, my unit was doing overnight marksmanship training on Halloween. Parents couldn't go trick-or-treating with their kids. Marines couldn't go out, get dressed in costumes, and go drinking. People were upset. So I saw how much that was damaging the morale, but we needed to stay there overnight for the sake of, training. So I wanted to make sure that everyone still had fun. And one of the things that I did throughout the day is I collected all the gum from the MREs, and that was going to be my candy. And I passed it out to all the squad leaders. And then I had the privates go around trick-or-treating for, around the range, for them. And, it's like 18, 19, 20-year-olds, but we're still having fun, even though it was a distraction from what we wanted to be doing. I even made a jack-o'-lantern by cutting out an MRE box into the shapes of the triangle nose and stuff, and I threw some chem lights in there, and we had a festive night on the range. So you can still apply your enthusiasm during these difficult times, to game development. During our submission crunch, we would send out daily bug reports, and I would throw in the Starship Troopers meme of just squash your bugs, do your part, have fun with what you're doing. I know it sounds silly, but it offers a break from the direness of expectations. Bearing. Bearing is creating a favorable impression in carriage, appearance, and personal conduct at all times. The ability to look, talk, and act like a leader all the time. When I was on my boards, which were basically me sitting on a chair in front of a table of 7 sergeant majors, it was all about bearing. It's about being stoic. I had to have confidence in the things that in the questions that I was being asked and in the answers. Even if I knew I was answering incorrectly, I had to be confident, and say, oh, you're referring to this. Okay, here's another story that I'm not too proud of, but I'm kind of proud of. I was caught underage drinking when I was in the military. I got in trouble with my first sergeant, and they called him Crazy Bob because that was the way that he handled, his anger issues. I had never been yelled at like that. He wanted to take away my rank. He wanted to, destroy me. He started, I just had to sit there and take it, basically. I had to stand at attention like this while he yelled at me. And while he raged out and got more and more upset, he started throwing things off his desk. And he even picked up his stapler and chucked it at me. And I felt it whiz by my head. And I knew that if I had not maintained my bearing, I probably would have gotten hit in the face. And nothing may have come out of it, but that could have easily happened. So one of the things that I want to talk about bearing is don't confuse bearing with hiding your feelings as toxic masculinity or strength. That's a completely different talk. But bearing is your ability to maintain poise and focus. So an example of bearing would be how do you react when people give you feedback? How do you react when you're reading review scores about your game or articles about your stuff and you're in a public setting? Both negative and positive, right? Maintain your bearing. Unselfishness, avoidance of providing for one's own comfort and personal advancement at the expense of others. Putting your team's welfare before your own is the essence of leadership. I'm going to say that again. Putting your team's welfare before your own is the essence of leadership. That's how important it is. This quality is not to be confused with putting other people in front of the accomplishment of the mission. You still need to get things done. In the Marine Corps, anytime that there's a public meal, it always starts with the junior Marines being fed first. That's where the food goes. If you're a private, you eat before the private first class. Then they call out the lance corporals, then the corporals, then the sergeants, then the staff sergeants. So, you have to make sure that you take care of your team before it's your turn. Another game dev example of this is that I was recently asked to be on a narrative design panel, and I gave up my seat to instead look for other people, women of color, that could be on those panels, right? Use your platform to elevate others. Courage. Courage is a mental quality that recognizes fear of danger or criticism, but enables you to proceed in the face of danger with calmness and firmness. This is, standing for what's right, even in the face of popular disfavor. Are you going to do the things that others won't, or are you going to maintain the status quo? I like to think of courage as, if you're not going to do it, who will, right? What are you going to do to step up? Knowledge. Knowledge is the understanding of a science or an art, the range of information, including professional knowledge and understanding of your team, right? Know your job, know your people, learn the duties of the people above you, teach your team to know, what their role is in the pipeline, teach them to know the job before you, the job after you, and, learn what's happening in the industry. Loyalty. It's the quality of faithfulness to your project, seniors, team, and player. I adapted this a little bit. You have to earn loyalty. It's not permanent. It can be fluid. But you should have a sense of loyalty, to your project. Show the team that you're interested in their welfare by giving them opportunities for professional development. Ways to increase loyalty are to build morale, publicize the successes of your team, give your team members opportunities to perform tasks that normally senior personnel would do. Endurance. The mental and physical stamina measured by the ability to withstand pain, fatigue, stress, and hardship. Leaders are responsible for not only leading their teams and for motivating as well, but you need to pace yourself. You need to be there for them from the beginning to the end. Sometimes it means running back and forth, getting things done at the cost of time where you would normally be doing your own job as well. It's funny because we work in sprints, but game development is a marathon, so pace yourself. All right, here's another picture of my dog. Those are the 14 leadership traits. Now I'm going to go into a couple of quick words of wisdom, pearls of wisdom, of things that I've learned that I think would definitely be beneficial for you. Leave every place better than you found it. When I was on a range once, I was picking up the trash that we had fired. I left some old rounds that looked like had been fired like 10 years ago. They were so like rusted over. And my sergeant yelled at me and he said, pick that up. And I said, but we didn't do it. And he then said, if you want to make the world a better place, it sometimes means cleaning up after someone else's mess. Make a friend in every department. My staff sergeant told me to make sure that I made a friend with a cook so we would have extra food, a friend with supply so that we could have extra tents, access to the Humvees in the motor pool, and batteries from our comm shop. When I went back to when I was at Telltale, I made sure that I made a friend in character art, in design, in programming, QA. Have a point of contact, make a friend. The keyword friend. Don't just use them for access. If you don't ask, you don't get. No one's a mind reader. So even though the things that in your head seem obvious, people are worried about their own stuff. And so unless you're the one advocating for those things, no one is knowing what you're going through or what you're thinking. I had to ask for a raise because when I started in the Bay Area, I was very lowballed and I was going into debt and it was hurting me. So I needed to do something about it. And they were like, oh my God, I didn't realize we were paying you so low. Credentials on the wall do not make you a decent human being. A lot of people have done things. They attach themselves to success, but what are you doing with it? What are you using for your platform? How are you passing on that knowledge, right? Be more. There will always be more work to do. There is only one of you. Take care of yourselves, right? If you're going to take care of the team, who is taking care of you? The time to relax is when you don't have time to relax. Pace yourself. Another picture of my dog. So everything that I've talked about basically boils down to two things. Learn the system, learn your people. This is me telling you that as leaders, it takes courage to challenge the things that have never been done before. It takes energy and resilience to get up when the world tells you to stay down. And it takes heart to care for those around you. Leadership is within us all. We all have to just find out what our motivation is. This is more than you. This is more than your project. This is more about than improving the state of the industry. This is about empowering others. And this is about elevating the medium as a whole. And I'm hoping that this will allow you to get things done and take care of your team. Any questions?
If you had one experience in the Marine Corps that you would want every single person at this conference to have, what would it be?
Yeah. Jen's question was, if I had one experience of the Marine Corps that I would want everyone to have, what would it be? I wish that I could boil it down into like one simple thing, but for me, it was the feeling of inspiration, the feeling of equality, the feeling of potential that I got from being a part of something, right? Like the esprit de corps, the ability to feel like we were doing something together, and that we were going to get things done. And there was this reliance, where you literally, your lives are at stake with the person to your left and to your right. And there is no palpable feeling like that. But I think that there are parallels that you can feel that in game development, like when you are working with your close teams, like the bonds that you create, the partnerships that you make, the investment into projects, like all those things I have felt in game development, and I also felt them in the Marine Corps. Yeah. Question?
So in the Marine Corps, they had these core lists of fundamentals, etc. And it was more of a when team get out of. How would you deal with maybe lifting leadership styles, where everyone didn't go from a similar background, didn't have these fundamentals? How do you? That probably goes into tactfulness, but then how, like, I guess how.
So the question is, how did I react to different leadership styles outside of the Marine Corps? The answer is I also did the same thing inside the Marine Corps, because there are different types of leadership styles. I remember one of the things that my boss used to say is that when you're determining your leadership style, pull from all the great things that you saw in other leaders, and everything that worked for you, pull into that. Now, sometimes we don't have that option, and we have bad leaders, or just bad, I don't want to say bad people, but people that are maybe not investing in their teams, or not well, okay, so I would say I go back to my two fundamentals, right? Mission accomplishment and troop welfare. So as a leader, right, I have started to then say, okay, well, the job still needs to get done. So whether this person is going to lead me or not, like, something needs to make it across that finish line. And if there is a gap in leadership, then a good leader will fill that gap regardless of their position. So sometimes that means doing extra work. Sometimes that means just, using your bearing to just deal with it, and, find out, like, how you can take care of the rest of the team. Because chances are you're not doing it alone, right? Like, there might be other people that you can take care of, that you can join in the camaraderie with, that are your peers, that are also going through the same situation. And, it boils down to, those two things, and then, using these traits to basically be how I conduct myself. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Any more questions? Yes.
Thanks for your service. When you think about being a strong leader, particularly when the gaming or business tends to have a reputation for being unforgiving, what are your thoughts around being vulnerable and strong?
I think vulnerability is the most important thing that you can do, right? Like, vulnerability immediately opens you up into authenticity, which means that you are now, telling your real story. You're putting yourself out there. And a natural thing happens where the people that really care about that will see that. You will, shine like a beacon, and people will trust you, right? That makes you more real. That makes you more authentic, having that vulnerability. I'm vulnerable all the time. Like, I feel like I've done enough in my life and experienced enough things where it's like, once you're afraid to die, like, everything just kind of goes a little bit lower, So it's like, oh, I just need to bring this up. I just need to have this conversation. I just need to do this. It's not that, it's always scary. It absolutely is always scary, because you don't know what's on the other side. But if it's worth it for you, like, put yourself out there, like be vulnerable, like connect with people. Like you are basically opening up the door to yourself, and you're, allowing people to get to know you, get to know the real you. I think it's very important.
I want to piggyback on that. How do when you leave the Marine Corps and you start to lead people in the business or outside, how do you extend that vulnerability without listening to vulnerability so that they
One of the things I said was learn your people, right? Find out how to connect with them. Like if you're really genuinely getting to know them, you will get to know them. When I was a producer, I had to deal with different departments. I would not talk to an engineer the same way that I would talk to an artist, the same way that I would talk to QA. Like you have to understand what makes these people themselves, and find those moments to connect. Like one of my favorite things to do in the game industry when there's a lull in conversation, I just ask, like, what are you playing? Like we're all some kind of like gamers, we're all kind of something. Like we have a common through line, and it's our passion that brings us into this industry. We just have to find ways to connect with each other. Of course. Anything else? Well, thank you so much.